All right, everybody, welcome back. It's time for another deep dive. And today, we're going to be looking at something a little bit different. We've got some source material here that we're going to be diving into. It's all about what it means to be a good wife.
Oh,
Yeah, so.
I know right off the bat that phrase in and of itself can be a
Yes.
little bit loaded for a lot
Yeah.
of people. So I just want to be upfront right away that we are not here to tell anybody
Mm-hmm.
how to be anything or to endorse any particular viewpoint. We're just
Yeah,
going to dive into this material, see what's interesting, see what we can glean from it,
That's it.
and just see what it might say about relationship expectations in general.
Absolutely.
So the source that we're looking at today is basically this list of principles.
Okay.
And they all kind of revolve around this idea of more traditional relationship roles. And I think what's interesting is that even though some of the language might feel a little outdated to some,
For sure.
like there are still some nuggets in here that could be applicable to relationships
I think
in general. What's intriguing is how this list kind of highlights certain aspects of relationships that are pretty much timeless, even if, the language used might feel a little outdated to some folks.
Yeah.
For example, several of these principles really hone in on communication, respect, and understanding your partner's needs.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just jump right in
Mm-hmm.
and start with that then. So one of the first things that this list really emphasizes is respecting your husband's opinions and choices,
Yeah.
even when you disagree. And it also talks about understanding what makes him feel loved. Now, to me, that sounds like pretty solid advice
I think so too.
for any relationship,
Right.
regardless of gender roles.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, at its core, that's really about empathy, right? It's about trying to see the world from your partner's perspective and understanding what makes them tick. And that's crucial for any healthy relationship.
It really is. And, it actually reminds me a lot of that whole concept of love languages.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You know how Dr. Gary Chapman talks about how couples who understand each other's preferred ways of giving and receiving love, they tend to have much higher relationship satisfaction.
Right.
So even though this list phrases it
Yeah.
from a very specific perspective, the underlying message about understanding your partner's needs
Yes.
is universally relevant.
I totally agree with that. You know, it's
Yeah.
it's almost like learning your partner's emotional dialect.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Right.
And speaking of communication, that actually leads us really well into another cluster of principles that we
Okay.
see here
Yeah.
in this list, and they're all focused on communication.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about things like active listening,
Mm-hmm.
expressing yourself clearly and respectfully, and even graceful conflict resolution. Again, these are core
Great.
skills for
Right.
healthy communication
Couldn't agree more.
in any relationship, no matter how you slice it. But I'm curious, because the source here seems to really focus on the wife's role in communication. Do you think that this maybe misses the mark a little bit?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, it's true that the source frames it
Mm.
from that particular angle, but we know that effective communication always involves both parties
Mm.
feeling heard and understood, right?
Right.
It's not about one person doing all the right things and the other person just passively receiving. It's about creating that dynamic
Yeah.
where both partners feel safe to express themselves openly and honestly.
So it's more about building a healthy communication style together
Exactly.
rather than just
partners.
playing a role. Yeah, I like that.
And that actually brings us to another principle on this list, which is about show appreciation.
Oh, yeah.
And this one really emphasizes celebrating your partner's efforts and offering genuine compliments, almost like positive reinforcement, right?
That's a really interesting way to look at it. It's like you're
Yeah.
giving your partner a gold star for
Yeah.
a job well done.
Kind of.
And, it might sound a little simplistic on the surface,
Sure.
but there's actually a lot of research to show that. Positive reinforcement can be incredibly powerful in shaping behavior.
It really can be.
Yeah.
When we feel appreciated, it motivates us to continue those positive behaviors. And in a relationship, that can lead to this upward spiral of positivity and support.
I love that upward spiral.
Yeah.
That's a much better way to look at it than the gold star.
Yeah.
Even
Right.
And it actually ties in really well with the next principle on the list, which is support his goals,
Oh, interesting.
which encourages wives
Mm-hmm.
to be supportive of their husband's ambitions. So are we talking like full-on cheerleader here?
Well, I don't think it necessarily has to be that extreme.
Yeah.
It's more about being a true partner, right?
Right.
Providing encouragement and being there for each other through both the triumphs and the challenges.
So it's more about being each other's rock,
Yeah, exactly.
kind of like being there for the emotional heavy lifting.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I like that.
And that kind of emotional support is really crucial for maintaining intimacy. Oh, yeah. Speaking of intimacy, that's another big one on this list. Now, it seems pretty straightforward on the surface,
Yeah,
but I think it's worth unpacking a little bit
I agree.
because when we talk about intimacy, we're talking about both physical and emotional intimacy.
That's right.
And I have a feeling that those two are more intertwined than people sometimes realize.
Oh, absolutely. They're completely intertwined. I think a lot of people tend to think about intimacy solely in terms of that physical connection, but emotional intimacy is just as vital, if not more so.
Yeah.
Without that strong emotional bond, physical intimacy can feel empty or even meaningless.
Yeah, it's like you can't really have one without the other.
Exactly. They feed into each other, creating a much more holistic and satisfying experience.
I like that. And it also kind of plays into this idea of being partners working together that we see in the next principle,
Okay.
which is be a partner, not a competitor. So teamwork makes the dream work. Right? But I'm curious, in a more traditional framework
Mm-hmm.
where maybe there's this expectation that the wife is managing the household and all that, does that always actually avoid resentment?
It's a good question.
Yeah. One partner feeling like they're carrying more weight.
And I think that's a challenge, even in more modern relationships, where those roles are more fluid,
For sure.
I
Yeah.
think. And the key is really finding that balance that works for both partners. And that requires open communication, flexibility, a willingness to compromise, and a shared understanding
Yeah.
of what fairness looks like in that particular dynamic.
So it's less about strict equality
Yeah.
in every single task
Right.
and more about that overall feeling of partnership and shared responsibility.
Exactly.
So it's an ongoing conversation.
It is.
Not a one-time agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I like that. Now, there's a principle here that I think might be a little bit more controversial
Okay.
in today's world,
Okay.
and that's say it attractive.
That's a loaded one.
Yeah, I know. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's easy to interpret that through a purely superficial lens, right?
Right.
But what if we try to reframe it as prioritizing well-being?
Yeah.
And not just physical appearance, but emotional, mental, and even spiritual well-being. It's about taking care of yourself so that you can show up as your best self in the relationship.
So less about conforming to a certain standard of attractiveness.
Exactly.
And more about self-care
Okay.
and how that impacts your overall well-being and, in turn, the relationship.
Yeah, it's about investing in your own health and happiness.
Yeah.
Which can then radiate outwards into the relationship.
Right, because if you feel good, you're going to be a better partner.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it actually kind of connects with the next principle, too, which is strengthen your home.
Okay.
This one focuses on creating a welcoming environment. And traditionally, it talks about managing household affairs. But, of course, today, ideas about home and who does what have shifted dramatically.
They really have.
What do you think?
Well, I think the modern concept of home is less about those rigid roles and more about shared responsibility. It's about creating a space that reflects both partners' needs and personalities, where both people feel comfortable and supported.
Less about one person
Yeah.
managing everything and more about creating a shared space that
Right.
works for both partners.
It's a partnership.
Yeah, both in terms of that physical space
Mm-hmm.
and that emotional environment.
I love that.
And last but not least, we have grow spiritually together.
Okay.
This one encourages shared prayer and spiritual growth. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think it speaks to the power of shared values and a sense of shared purpose in a relationship. When couples have a strong spiritual connection or a shared belief system, it can provide this sense of grounding and support. However, it's important to acknowledge that not all couples share the same beliefs. That's okay, too.
Right.
The key is respecting each other's individual beliefs and allowing space for personal spiritual exploration.
So it's not about
Yeah.
forcing your beliefs on your partner. It's more about finding common ground.
And supporting each other's spiritual journeys, whatever they may look like. Exactly.
Wow, this has been such an interesting deep dive.
It really has.
We've covered a lot of ground here talking about these principles for being a good wife. And again, I just want to emphasize that we're not endorsing this perspective. We're just trying to explore it and see what we can learn from it.
Absolutely.
But what I think is so fascinating is how these principles,
Yeah.
even though they're rooted in a very particular framework.
Yeah.
They still offer these valuable insights into relationship dynamics
Yeah.
that are relevant today.
They really do.
It highlights how
Yeah.
certain core elements
Yeah.
of successful relationships, like communication, respect, and understanding,
Yeah.
they transcend
Yeah.
specific role or societal expectations.
For sure.
So as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question.
Okay.
How do you think these principles hold up in the modern world,
Mm-hmm.
considering how much relationships and societal expectations have evolved? Food for thought,
Yeah.
maybe even a conversation starter with your partner. And remember, this was just one perspective. There's endless nuances to explore when it comes to relationships.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and keep those conversations going. We'll see you next time.